Hello chess friends and welcome to Yugoslav Chess channel and welcome to a new chess opening theory video. So in this video we're going to discuss the hyper-accelerated rank Sicilian defense from Black's perspective. So in this video I wanted to show you really an effective opening against e4, and in this video I've prepared about 20 opening traps for Black in the hyper-accelerated rank Sicilian defense that I think could be working for you. These traps are working of course in a beginner's level, but they are also very cool traps in an intermediate level of chess, and that's why I decided to create a new video about this opening, because if you're familiar with my channel, I've created already this hyper accelerated rank Sicilian defense from Black's perspective, but I've decided to make a new video because I discovered the novelties, I discovered new approaches, new sidelines, new miniatures that could work for you. So that's why I've started now a new series about the hyper accelerated rank Sicilian defense. So today we'll discuss only this position after first move e4 and we play c5 the Sicilian, knight f3. We go now into the hyper accelerated rank Sicilian defense with the move g6. We don't play d6 or knight to c6 immediately. Knight to c6 could lead of course into the accelerated rank Sicilian defense, or if you play d6 you could maybe reach the command rank Sicilian defense. This move order, this hyper accelerated move order is allowing you to avoid several openings. After maybe something like knight to c6 you could then face maybe here this Nf3 attack, which is very unpleasant to handle. A great player, a strong player will many times play this opening, and you could face then many positional problems. Although it's a good opening for Black, we're going to discuss, as I said so far, the hyper accelerated rank Sicilian with the move g6. And today after move d4, c takes d4, white can capture now the pawn with the knight or with the queen. Today we'll discuss only this position with queen takes d4. So I've prepared about 20 opening tricks and tips, miniatures here for Black after the first after the fourth move queen takes d4. And this move is already a very dynamic approach of white. When knight takes d4 happens, I think we get a more positional battle. After queen takes d4 the game becomes very tactical, so put your seatbelts on. Now we're going to see really spectacular opening traps for Black after queen takes d4. Now we play of course knight to f6. We have to cover this diagonal because our rook is hanging, and now after move e5 we play knight to c6, the counter attack against the queen. And now, believe it or not, many times white will play a huge mistake in the beginning, can maybe play the move queen to h4. And when I watch now my database from Black's perspective, my opponents have played about 300 times this mistake. When I played on Lichess after queen takes h4, there is now this problem. We simply pick up now the pawn here on e5 and we play queen to a5. We get our knight back, we gain the pawn. White is, I think, much worse here. So that's why after knight to c6 there are maybe different opportunities for white. White could also maybe go with queen to c3, but then we have knight to e4, or you can also try to set up a trap with the move e6. And here after something like e takes f6 we have this one, bishop to b4. And when I again watch now my database, I played this trap 38 times, so 38 players fell for this, and I won of course many games after bishop to b4. Also, what could white could make as a mistake after move knight to c6, attacking the queen to e3 is also not good, because there is now this problem. We play knight to g4, we attack the queen and also we attack the pawn. If something like I don't know, queen to e4 happens, then we have a similar tactic, knight takes e5, knight takes e5 again, like in the previous example, queen to a5 check, and we get the knight back. Again, you gain the pawn. When I again watch now this my Lichess database, I played this trap 19 times. So really also a very often opening trap. So here after instead of this move queen to e4, after knight to g4, your opponent could try here queen to f4, but now you have this one, bishop to h6 hitting the queen, and now we pick up this one. This one is falling. Again, I would say game over here for white. So you see, many times after move queen takes d4 and knight to f6, knight to c6, white is not reacting correctly where to go with the queen, has many problems to find the best solution. Actually, queen to a4 should be the best move here for white. So let's see now different opportunities again here for white. After move queen takes d4, again we're playing the same position, knight to f6, e5, knight to c6, and now white finally plays the correct choice. Queen to a4 is now getting the queen on a good square. Now we play knight to d5. After queen to e4, this should be now the standard line of the hyper accelerated rank Sicilian defense. After queen takes d4, now we play knight to b6, and now after knight to c3, the main goal of the hyper accelerated rank Sicilian defense is to play now the move d5, because in the common Dragon Sicilian you usually play the move d6, and now your opponent has to react. If he plays somewhere else, then you have an advanced pawn, you can push the pawn further, you have opportunities to play bishop to f5, knight to b4, hitting the c2 weakness, so you have good attacking chances if your opponent doesn't take e takes d6 en passant. But let's see now what happens if your opponent plays e takes d6 en passant. Then you have this one, bishop to f5 counterattack. And again, there are many choices. If your opponent plays something like d takes e7, then you have a calm bishop to e7, and actually you have already equalized the game. Although you lost a pawn now in the sequence, notice that you have brought out all of your minor pieces into the game, so 4 minor pieces are already out. You get an extra tempo against the queen, and again your opponent could make several mistakes. After something like queen to e3, we can always get the pawn back, or if he tries queen to e2, then we have this one, kingside castling, bishop to e3, and here after bishop to b4, believe me or not, white is much worse here. Black is much better in this position. Although you lost a pawn after something like a3, we can pick up now even this knight, give up our dragon bishop that you usually should not give up. And actually many times I've seen also this line, white is relying simply that you never probably give up your dark square bishop in the game, but actually you can do it, because look at this, white's position is cramped because he doesn't have a great development with his pieces. After something like b takes c3, we can occupy now the e file, knight to d5, in some lines bishop to e6, bishop to f5 is working. So there are several light square problems that you can exploit, and again I would call this as a trap, because your opponent probably doesn't believe that you will give up here the bishop for a knight. So that's why great I think sideline also here for black. After bishop to f5, your opponent could try queen to f4, but then you play bishop to g7. After something like d takes e7, queen to e7. Now I wanted to show you again a beautiful positional trap here for black. After something like bishop to e3, again you can give up the bishop for knight here. After bishop takes c3, and here again black is much better. After b takes e3, we attack now the queen, we get an extra tempo. We could play knight to e3, but I would not suggest you to play that. You play queen to a3, hitting this pawn further, and you also prepare after something like bishop to d2 a beautiful queenside castling. This is now a surprise element here for you, and black is, believe it or not, much better here. Again, light score problems here all over the board. Weak c3 pawn, the king is endangered on the a file. This position is demolished already on this side of the board, so you have great flexibility to attack now both sides with your heavy artillery, with of course the centralized knight, with this bishop here. I think completely busted position here for white. So this is now, I think, a very important line also to notice here for black. So let's see now different opportunities. Again, we play this line, knight to c6, queen to a4, again good move for white. Knight to d5, again this idea, but now white could go into a different line, queen to b3 instead of here queen to e4. After queen to b3, the best way here for black is to proceed with knight to c7, and that's, believe me or not, even the only move. Every other move is really bad. If you play something like knight to b6, then you could face maybe some ideas of a4, a5, hitting the knight. You don't have a good square. White could have a great expansion on the queen side. So that's why knight to c7 keeps your knight intact, covers many squares here in the center of the board, also around the square e6. You're not vulnerable, but you are preparing here a queenside flank attack with b5, a5, a4. You're the one now that you're attacking now the queen side, and the knight on c7 is really not only, I would say, a good defensive piece, but also a great supporter of your attack on the queen side. After knight to c7, one of the main approaches by black could be the move bishop to f4. And this bishop to f4 approach is actually an approach by white to launch a sort of a similar attack like in the Yugoslav attack, when white is usually playing against the common dragon Sicilian, when white is trying to deliver here some attacking chances with h4, h5, maybe then queen to e3, trying to trade off your dark square bishops, and if you castle maybe kingside, you could get destroyed after a couple more moves. So this is now his main approach, and the bad thing here for black, I would say, is that you don't have your knight anymore on f6 here. The knight on f6 is always a good defender, especially around the square h5 when white is trying to push the pawn further. So now with the move e5, you don't have so many defenders, and actually bishop to f4 is quite an unpleasant approach to handle here for black. But don't worry, now you have already this beautiful idea, knight to e6, you get an extra tempo after bishop to g3. Now comes actually a novelty that I've discovered, and believe me or not, this move has never been played so far in chess history. It's an easy knight to c5, and when I watch now also the Masters database, no one played this move, but this move knight to c5 is already a beautiful liberating line for black. Black should be even slightly better here, because after something like queen to c3, you have always this one, knight to e4, you get the fork, and now when you play something like queen to a5, knight to c3, knight takes c3, queen takes c3, you trade off the queens, but after b takes c3, here I would say you're much better, because this is a vulnerable pawn. You can attack it further, you can expand here. b6 bishop to b7 is an opportunity, so I guarantee you have a good game here. For sure. So also what you can do, if you don't want to complicate further after queen to a5, you can also immediately grab the bishop, and then this common Yugoslav attacking method with h4 h5 is not so dangerous, because then the bishop is a key defender of your dark squares, and then you can also go for the e5 pawn again, maybe queen to a5, attacking this one. Again, a good continuation here for black. So here what black could try after this move, knight to c5, he could of course try queen to b5, but then you play knight to e4 anyway, and then after something like bishop to h4, he's desperately trying maybe to keep his dark square bishop on the board. Then you play a tricky d5, again this method that we have discussed. After e takes d6, now you play knight to d6, and after queen to a4, here you again much better, because when you watch now the piece activity, look at this, bishop to g7, already attacking this one, you play bishop to g7, and now you have again a faster development than white, which is of course a great thing when you play with the black pieces. Having an opportunity to be even slightly faster in development with the black pieces is a great thing. I'm not saying this position or something is completely winning for black, but look at this, bishops are out, queen is a little bit endangered here, bishop to d7 could happen, knight to d4, similar stuff, kingside castling, now easy play. You can also maybe try here to expand in the center of the board later, of course, when you get the queen out of this mess, but I think pushing also the pawns could be working in this position for you. So again, I would say a beautiful position from black's perspective. So let's see now different opportunities. Now white could try here a different method. Again, this approach with knight to b3, we play knight to c7, and now white doesn't want to play the move bishop to f4 that we have seen previously, because then you're vulnerable again to this attacks by knight to e3, knight to e6, knight to c5, knight to d4. We have seen then the bishop gets a little bit exposed. White is trying now different method with bishop to d2, is trying to protect now this very advanced pawn on e5 with the move bishop to c3, and then still wants to launch this flank attack, but without the support of the bishop. First of all, what white is trying to do is fix the pawn on e5 and then launch h4 h5 and create of course some damage. If you castle on this side of the board, white could have then a good game. But now you don't worry, you could play here a beautiful bishop to g7, and now after bishop to c3 you have a beautiful b5, because if you have to anticipate here that white will eventually try this flank attack on the king side, but in order to make anything out of this, white has to also castle somewhere, and when we watch now maybe this potential opposite side attack game where white could attack the king side and you could attack the queen side, you are already much faster here because you have already advanced your pawn on b5. And actually here white cannot even take because you get this one, rook to b8 is winning the game immediately. You can maybe support it, but then a6 wins simply the piece and game over here for white. So I've seen now really beautiful game in the database in this particular position that we have discussed with this method, bishop to d2, bishop to c3. It's a gameplay by Edoardo Iturrizaga Bonelli where he played this attacking method with the move b5 and his opponent tried a3. But now the tricky part is actually that you can try a really beautiful attacking method and you can actually maybe even trap the queen here, because after something like kingside castling, and now white is trying this flank attack with h4 h5 and similar stuff, tries of course to do some damage, then maybe with knight to g5, then you have a beautiful a6. And that's the spectacular thing about this queenside attack, that first of all you fix the pawn here on b5, and now after something like h4, Iturrizaga played the beautiful d6. After e takes d6, we have this one, bishop to e6, and actually the queen gets trapped. Really wild stuff. So you have to also notice that when the queen gets cornered, and with this beautiful two knights and with this beautiful now bishop's activity, sometimes even maybe if you reach a different position, watch out for potential queen traps from black's perspective, because now the queen is out of game. Well, here in this original game white tried this one, d takes e7, but still the queen is hanging. Here white took, now black took of course the queen, white tried bishop to f8. Now we play first of all bishop to d5, which Iturrizaga also played. Great move, because after something like bishop to h6 we can pick up this one, and now we can go for this one, queen to e5, hitting now the pawn. The rook is also lost. Game over here for white. Really wild stuff. But I really like this approach here after move h5, that you play d6 and then bishop to e6. This is game over immediately for white. Great queen trap after this bishop to d2, bishop to c3 approach. So let's see now different method. Again, we have this queen takes d4 stuff. Now white is trying a different method, doesn't want to play e5 immediately, anticipates the possibility of the move knight to c6, and tries now the move bishop to b5. So now we should again not worry, because here black is already better. White didn't play maybe here the optimal line. After bishop to b5 you have this one, you attack the bishop, and probably white will also try to attack your knight with e5. But don't worry, now we have a beautiful a takes b5, your opponent takes, we have this intermediate attack against the queen, and now again white is trying a very aggressive approach with queen to h4. Again, he's trying here to play something like bishop to h6, like in this Yugoslav attack methods, when he's trying to trade off your dark square bishop, when he's trying to put more pressure on the king side, maybe even with the rook and queen battery, delivering checkmate somehow. But don't worry. Now actually your main weakness, the pawn on b5, actually becomes your main strength, because you have now a beautiful rook to a4. After queen to h3, now black is immediately winning here the game, because you have this one, bishop to pardon me, d5 liberates now the bishop on c8, and when the queen comes here on g3, you have rook to g4, and it's game over here for white. So of course white doesn't have to play the game like this, can play something else. Let's see this common position again with this delaying move of e5, plays first of all the move bishop to b5. Now again we take, and now again we have this method. But now your opponent could try f takes e7, because he's also attacking your queen, and he's thinking, okay, we can trade off the queens. You have this messed up pawn structure here, you have many isolated pawns. Realize simply that you have a double pawn structure on the b file, but don't forget that you have also, from black's perspective, the beautiful bishop pair on the board, and the bishop pair is very destructive in this open battles, because after bishop to e7 your opponent is trying maybe queen to h6, but now you have a tricky rook to e4, and now comes the really dirty part. After bishop to e3, white thinks that White solved all of the positional problems. You probably not give up the rook for a bishop. Now you can castle or maybe play knight to c3, but now you play a stunning knight to d4. That's the actual trap. You're trying now to deliver here a fork on c2 against the rook and the king, and your opponent could maybe try knight to d4, but now the tricky part is that the knight is deflected now from the defense of these two dark squares, and you have now rook to h4 attacking now the queen. The queen has to go here, and now we have bishop to f6. Probably white can take here the rook, but still you're better, I would say. Look at this. You gain the queen, you still have your bishop here on the board. Rook is very active. In the next couple of moves you can play d5, liberate also your light square bishop. I think we can agree completely winning position here for white. I found also one game in which white tried to battle after this method with rook to h4, f takes e7, bishop to e7. Again, this idea, bishop to e3, knight to d4. White tried to battle with knight to d2. Okay, say you can play maybe knight takes c2, but then I'll also take out your rook. Now you have to be accurate, because there's again a beautiful opening trap. Again, the queen is a little bit exposed, it's a little bit misplaced, and now we have to use different methods. But first of all, we can try knight takes c2, comes of course with a check, king to e2. Your opponent is saying, okay, if you pick up my rook, then I'll pick up also your rook in e4. But now you have a beautiful d5. This is again a beautiful method. Even if, for instance, knight to e4 happens, then you have this one, d takes e4, knight to e5, and then you play f6. The knight has to play maybe here something like knight to g6, but then queen to d3 is here a beautiful checkmate. Really stunning stuff. If, for instance, here instead of this move knight to g6, rook from a to d1 happens, then you have queen to c7 again. If the knight moves somewhere, then queen to c4 is a beautiful checkmate. So after move d5, you see here knight to e4 is not working. Your opponent could try rook from a to c1, but now you attack the queen. Queen drops back. You have immediately f6. The queen comes again to g3, but now you have rook to g4. The pattern that we have seen previously. Again, the queen gets trapped. White will get some material, of course, for the lost queen, but I think we can agree again that black is completely winning here. So really great, again, attacking methods, even if white tries this knight to d2 in order to somehow get also the rook on e4. So let's see now different methods. Again, we have this queen to d4 sideline. We play knight to f6, and again this a6 method, e5, we take, and now white is playing the more correct approach, I would say, with queen to e3. But we are not worrying here. What we should not do immediately is to play the move e6, because here your opponent could try maybe to get the knight into the game. The best approach here, I would say, is to play him simply a b4. This is, I think, a must move for black, because black is not allowing here this knight to come on a natural score. If you allow this knight to come into the game after something like e6, then the knight could come on c3, then also on d5, because after potential e6 you could not take because of the tensions on the e file. So that's why b4 is not allowing here this knight to come out. After something like f takes e7, we play queen to e7. We even trade off the queens, but now after queen to e7, bishop to e7, white is many times trying this approach to play the move c3, and now comes a very important moment of this particular position. The best approach is actually here to play the move at d5, and now comes, I would call this sort of a positional trap by black against white, because white could maybe fall for this one. White could maybe try to play knight to d4. He's hoping after a couple of trades of pieces that he could leave you here with an isolated d pawn, and you notice that the pawn is on a light square, so usually you should maybe try to defend it somehow, because the knight could come somewhere where it could attack this pawn. But actually this pawn move b4 is paralyzing, it's neutralizing here the knight's activity. After something like kingside castling, after bishop to f5, black is already much better. You're trying maybe to finally develop your knight, but now we compete here. We simply occupy the c file. He's trying to get the knight, we get the rooks into the game. Look at this, and now in one moment black is winning. I think white has to step back from the defense of the b2 pawn and the game is over, I think, here for white. So not a good continuation anymore here for white. So you see, after this move knight to d4, white is hoping somehow to trade off more pieces, to somehow trade off everything, because the main strength of blacks is, I think, the bishop pair here. Although you're left now with this bishop to f5 is here really a demolition of white's position. Also in some lines, a calm a-file attack could work. Also good continuation here for white, so for black, pardon me. I think not a good position for sure here for white anymore. So that's why let's see now different approach. Again, this idea, let's go back when black is trying this bishop to b5 approach, but now we take, and again he tries to trade off the queens. We again play b4 or similar stuff, and now your opponent could try here maybe the move king to d1. But now you have to be familiar with a very important tactical concept on the a file. Now your opponent is thinking, okay, now I don't want to castle, the queens will be probably off the board. At least I don't have to worry here how to protect my pawns on this side of the board. But now after queen to e3, bishop to e3, bishop to g7, and something like king to c1, it seems so that white has solved now all of the tactical problems. But now we have again this move d5 that we have discussed with the preparation to play the move d4. Your opponent is trying here rook to d1 to compete against this pawn, but now you play kingside castling, allow here even rook to d5, but now comes the stunning b3. b3 actually was played in a beautiful game played by Eugene Perelshtin. Here he outplayed his opponent with a stunning b3 tactic. Of course, you cannot take a takes b3 here because of the tensions on the a file. What you could try maybe is c takes b3, but then you get this one, knight to b4, the rook drops back, and now we have this one, we attack the king. Now this rook is coming, rook trades, and now look at this, bishop to b2 is working also. Maybe here knight to c3, attacking immediately the king, getting the rook, but I think here bishop takes b2 is immediately winning here, of course, for black. So that's why b3 is a tactic that you see now also that will work in a couple more examples. b3 is such a stunning move. You saw white took the pawn on d5 but got destroyed here after move knight to b4. Also, for instance, in this original game, white tried to move a3, but now we play knight to b4. You cannot take, of course, then the rook is lost. Here in this game, a takes b4 has been played, rook takes a1, c3, and now bishop to f5 again. Game over here for white. So let's see different opportunities. Again, we have this approach with bishop to b5, e5, we takes, and now white is trying maybe here to retreat to d1. So it seems like a good choice because you're waiting here something like e takes f6 to happen. E takes f6 wouldn't be actually the optimal way here for black, because then after castling and rook to e1 you could face many problems. The structure is already weakened here, so that's why a better approach is to play now the move e6 after something like kingside castling. Again, the move b4. b4 is very important because again it controls the knight here on c3. After something like rook to e1 we pick up now the pawn. After something like c3, bishop to g7, you can allow this one, but now we play simply d5, and I would say here black is much better. Knight to d4, trading off everything. Again, you're continuing the game with the bishop pair, with a healthy structure here in the center of the board, with a good activity. Bishop will come to d7, rook to c8. I think again a pleasant game here to play for black. So let's see different approaches here. Again, this method with bishop to b5. Again, white is trying this move queen to e3. We play the move b4. Again, kingside castling, queen takes e3, bishop to e3, and now after bishop to g7, one of the best approaches here by white is to play c3 immediately. Now we play castling, rook to d1, and again we have this beautiful move d5. What also white could play immediately is to move knight to d4, but then we play d5, and if your opponent is playing now rook to d1, now you have a beautiful choice with bishop to g4. The rook is under fire. After f3 we play counterattack, rook to e8 hits now the bishop, king to f2, and now you play bishop to d7. And it seems so that maybe white is better because of this very well placed knight on d4, and you're continuing the game with an isolated pawn, but actually this position should not worry you so much, because after knight to b5, maybe liberating now the d file to get this pawn on d5, you have a beautiful d4. d4 is a stunning move, because after something like c takes d4, if he takes, then you have really great attacking chances with rook takes e3, and that's the actual trap here, because after king to e3, you have knight to a5, hitting now this knight. Maybe something like knight to d6 could happen. We attack the knight, you're trying to escape, but again knight to c4. Also here knight to b3 is a great concept, simply trapping the rook, but you can also play knight to c4, attacking the king. Look at this, knight to b2, again knight to c4, rook to d1, rook bishop comes. So many options, but I think we can agree that again white is much worse. You're again having a nice attacking flow. You're simply destroying here white position. After kingside castling, as I said, your opponent is not battling maybe with knight to d4, tries here a rook to d1, hitting now this pawn, but now you play d5 anyway. And after rook to d5, we have now this one, bishop to e6. Your opponent is trying to battle, and now you go for this line, knight to a5 with the threat of knight to b3. Your opponent has to play now knight from b to d2, and you have now, I think, sort of a nice liberating line with b takes c3, b takes c3, you pick up this one. Again, you continue the game with the bishop pair. Again, a slightly better position here for black, very familiar position, I think, after this move d5. So you see rook to c1 can be played, we attack the rook, so you will have your fun here for sure, because you have still the bishop pair. You can always attack the exposed rooks now all over the board, so good continuation here for black for sure. So let's now a different method. Again, white is trying this bishop to b5 approach. Now again he retreats b4. He's trying to attack you. Now he's trying to protect this pawn on f6, but we can simply attack this bishop and then go for this one. Again, nothing spectacular is going on. He's trying maybe to play rook to e1. We play bishop to g7, allow him here even to move queen to d5, but now we play castling. The queen has to step back, and now with queen to f5, we simply attack further the lie squares. The lie square problems now are obvious in white's position. He's trying something like c takes b4, and now we have e5. If something like b5 happens, you have this one counter attack, queen drops that, and then look at this, knight to b4, and with the support of the lie square bishop, with the support of the queen, the rooks are coming into the game. Look at this, the amazing position for the bishop here. Of course, in some lines maybe e4 is working, so I think again you'll have fun in your game for sure. So as I said, here the issue is that in this particular line, white is probably thinking that you will not be able to play this move d5 that is liberating you, and after rook to e1 he thinks that you're lost because of queen to d5, but you have to play a calm game, kingside castling, and now you are on the attacking side, especially because of this lie square problems on the queen side. So let's see now different approach again by white. We attack the queen. Now he's here after move knight to after queen to d4, knight to f6. Your opponent is not playing bishop to b5, he's not playing e5, he stays with the queen in the center of the board and plays now the move knight to c3. And this knight to c3 approach is actually even the best approach here for white. Knight to c3 is a delaying move, is forcing you, of course, to play the move knight to c6, but now it's a different story here for white, because white has already brought out also many pieces into the game, and he's threatening now the move e5. Now the best choice here for black is to play the move d6, but now you allow e5, and now you play knight to g4. You go for this pawn on e5. Your opponent could try here e takes d6. We play queen to d6, and you're pretty solid here. After bishop to f4, you have this one, queen to c5, castling. Don't fall for dirty traps. You should not take knight to c2 immediately, knight to f2, pardon me, immediately, because your opponent will try something like this. You pick up this one, but now it gets very tricky with knight to d5. Although you took a rook, there's simply no good defense against here knight to c7, so you will probably get destroyed, because here in this position after bishop to f4 and queen to c5 and queenside castling, you have to first bring the bishop out. Bishop to g7 must move here for black, and now maybe later you can go for for the f2 pawn. White could maybe try knight to d5, but now you castle. And here in one game that I found, white even tried this one, b4, but now after a couple of trades of pieces, knight takes f2 was played, and here black should be much better. Bishop to c4 was the continuation. Now this one is coming, so you will get your rooks for sure here. You got enough material, you have still the good bishop on the board. You will get the rook for 2 minor pieces and 2 pawns, which is, I think, a great compensation. You will have rook, 2 pawns against 2 minor pieces, and I think in this open battle the rooks are pretty solid here, so I would also say a good game here for black for sure. So let's see now different approach. Again, white is delaying to play e5 or bishop to b5. He plays now the tricky knight to c6. We have queen to a4, d6, e5. Now we play again knight to g4. Here we have bishop to b5 now. And although your opponent could try maybe something like this, you take even after queen to c6, bishop to d7, queen goes here maybe, then still you have here knight to e5, knight to e5, bishop to e5, and the position is pretty solid here. You have a healthy pawn structure, you still have the bishop pair on the board. The main goal maybe here for black is somehow to trade off the queens. Also bishop to a5 is pretty solid, going for the c2 weakness, rook to b8 going then for the b2 weakness. So you have again, I think, a nice attacking flow. Again, a solid position here for black for sure. So it's bishop to b5 is not so dangerous because white has to worry also about the e5 pawn. So that's why white would try many times to play bishop to f4, but now we take knight to e5, knight to e5, d takes e5, now comes rook to d1, and now you have to be careful. Bishop to d7, after something like bishop to g5, you have a nice liberating line with knight to d4. You have a very good liberating line because after bishop to d7, queen to d7, and after a couple of trades of queens here, your opponent could try maybe to attack your knight, but now we go here with your king, takes, and here your opponent cannot take, of course, because of rook to e8. If you, of course, doesn't take, then you have here e5, f6. You will have a nice centralizing position, and of course you have still an extra pawn, which is of course completely winning endgame here for black. So you see, very tricky position after bishop to d7. Actually, the best way here for white, instead of bishop to g5, is to proceed with bishop to e3, but then you play callousing, and now rook to e8. Your opponent could try maybe something like knight to d5. You get out of this finally d-file mess. Your opponent is trying to attack, and now after bishop to f8, I think again this should be a solid position for you here, so nothing to worry about in the next couple of moves. Then you can also, of course, also try to kick away the bishop. So of course this knight is a little bit unpleasant, but you can always compete with bishop to e6. So I think again a solid position again here for black. So let's see now the last example. Here opponent again is delaying this move, plays knight to c3, keeps the queen on the board. Again we play knight to g4, bishop to f4, and now he could take. E takes d6. He wants to open now the position immediately, but now you have to play a very tricky line with kingside callousing. If he plays now something like bishop to b5 to keep the tension, then you have e5, bishop to g5. Now you pick up this one, you can play knight to f6, and again I think you're pretty solid. But after kingside callousing, for instance, if he plays here d takes e7, then you have this one, rook to e8. You're attacking simply the king on the e file, and after something like bishop to e2, you pick up here the pawn. You may be getting attacked, but now again this method with bishop to c3 that we have seen in the beginning of this video is also working, because you have a great attack here on the e file. You're trying, your opponent is trying to battle. You attack the queen. We play something like this. You allow him to take bishop to c4. Again, this bishop takes c3. Notice that it's sort of a pattern that many times white is forgetting about, because he thinks that no way that you're going to give up your Darsko bishop, your dragon bishop in such a position. But actually look at this bishop takes c3. Consider this, sometimes it makes always so much damage in white's camp. Look at this now. The queen has to step back. You have a great attack here. Game over again here for white. So Okay, I hope that you enjoyed our study. So as I said, this was our analysis after queen takes d4. We'll do also different sidelines, different opportunities, but I think this is a position that bothers many players, what you do, how to proceed here. So as I said, knight to f6 first, and then in some lines, knight to c6 will come for sure. You get your extra tempo against the queen. We saw now different approaches, and I think I could have solved maybe some positional problems for you in this particular position. So, okay, if you want to see some other analysis about a hyper accelerated ranked Sicilian defense, here's the link of our playlist, and if you like this content, hit the subscribe button. See you soon with some more videos, and what do we say in the end? Chess is the best, of course.